I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
All right, thanks for joining us here on Morning Rush. We begin this hour with continuing breaking news coverage. British Prime Minister Liz Truss speaking just moments ago, announcing she will indeed be resigning.
Truss has been on the job for less than 2 months, taking the job in early September.
And in her 6 weeks on the job were tumultuous, some would say disastrous, to say the least. In recent weeks, she's been facing calls to do just this, to step down, all of it because of her economic plan, which basically spooked the markets and triggered a lot of economic turmoil in the country, which now leads to this moment of political turmoil. Truss said, quote, "I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected." You heard that just there in that soundbite. This announcement comes just one day after Truss said she was going to stay in power because she's, quote, "a fighter and not a quitter." But as we've seen from Boris Johnson to her, British politics changes very, very quickly. Some describing this, in fact, as an unprecedented crisis in British politics. So now that leaves the UK searching for a new leader for the second time since Boris Johnson stepped back, and that was just July. We'll be following the situation and bringing any updates as they come in, but a major move today in international politics. We'll see what's next.
In this 44 days in office, that means that she is the shortest serving leader in British political history. So keep that in mind when they do get a new PM in just a week or so. We heard from one of our correspondents. It'll be the third. So it's a very revolving door, quickly revolving.
Think about her term. 3 days in, the Queen dies. Economic plan disaster, and you have to step down.
Absolutely.
So joining us now is Ashish Prashar, a former press secretary of Boris Johnson, who, of course, Liz Truss replaced in September. Thanks for coming back on the show. Good to see you again. So how shocking is this resignation? I mean, there are people that were not necessarily surprised, but this is still a surprisingly short term that she was in office here. So what is your overall feeling?
I mean, I feel like after fifth prime minister in 6 years, we shouldn't be surprised. This is a party at civil war with itself. And frankly, that's what caused even Brexit, a party that was divided on an issue. This party's been like this for a long time, and we're seeing the end of it. There's no more leaders left. There's no more talent left, for lack of a better term, to put on the front bench, to put in front of the public. And that economic plan was a disaster, but it's a disaster by people who were unfit to be in office in the first place. And it shouldn't be surprised that they've ousted her. But what are we going to do? Replace him with another Conservative who has actually been in government for the last 10 years. The only thing now left for the public is to demand a general election because they have no mandate to govern anymore.
Can we stop right there? Because I'm fascinated. Because what's so different about America is that you guys elect the parliament, and then in and of itself, they elect the prime minister. It's not a direct election like we elect our president. So when you talk about the public demanding a general election, meaning that to pick a leader, that the nation wants, as opposed to what Parliament wants or the party in running Parliament wants, how does that work? Can the public do that? Is the sentiment there? And if not, does this resignation get public sentiment there to say, hey, let us go back to the ballot box?
I mean, I think the sentiment is there after the disastrous economic policy that you mentioned there. I mean, people feel the markets have crushed pensions. They've crushed everything for everyday Brits. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, it leveled the economy. And I think the sentiment there for a general election is brewing. I think this resignation tips it over the edge. They can elect another leader within the Conservative Party to lead the country, but that person will have no governing mandate.
But what does it take to get to a general election? Politically, what does it take to get there?
I think the people, what would it take? I think the people will take the streets. I actually think they're going to start protesting if they elect another leader without setting a general election date. They can elect a leader. The country needs a leader in a moment like this regardless, but that leader needs to set a general election date. Now, our parliament is different, right? You have 5 years to call an election, right? So once you've won, you have a full 5-year term. David Cameron and Nick Clegg, when they were elected in 2010, put it together a fixed term act, so you couldn't just randomly call an election. That was undone by Boris Johnson, right? He called a short election. And what's happened is now there'll be a mass demand from both all the other parties in Parliament, but also the public, to just get this over and done with. I think everyone is very tired of this government because the faces are not changing, right? That cabinet, how many more Conservative people can we go through in that cabinet? How many more names? I mean, Jeremy Hunt was in government 10 years ago under David Cameron. Now he's the Chancellor. They're just recycling people at this point. And the economy is collapsing in front of us. So people will take to the streets on this.
And that being said, the name Boris Johnson has been tossed around. What are the odds of
reactions?
Your old boss.
I mean, it's Trumpian, wouldn't it? I mean, like, the guy doesn't, you know, he is, look, for all of Boris's issues, he is the ultimate survivor, right? So this is a guy who was fired from News Corp for forgery, ended up being the editor of another magazine. This guy, you know, the guy who said he would never run for parliament while he was the editor of that magazine, and then ran for parliament, and then said he'd give up the magazine, and then, you know, under mass pressure still stayed as an editor of a magazine. He is a survivor. He, you know, Boris, if he wants to come back, will try to come back. I also think he's smart. I think he knows this is the end of this Conservative government. And if he came back, he'd rather do it after a general election and try and be their savior.
Interesting. So you mentioned that the people will probably take to the streets, they'll protest. You mentioned that the other parties within the parliament will also, they're tired, they want this general election. But is there anything legally or in place to make that happen that is going to spur a general election? Because can't whoever comes up next in the Conservative Party just say, hey, I think I'm good where I'm at, and this is all it's going to be, and there will be no general election?
100%. There is nothing legal. They have a 5-year term. Boris won that term a couple of years back. They have about 2 years left. There's nothing legal to force a general election. I think it'll be public sentiment that drives it. I think there'll be a mass demand. I even think our own media, right and left, are just fed up. You know, that economic package kind of leveled everyone across the board. And I think, you know, everyone's going to demand a date to be set in stone now. And, like, let's get this over and done with. If they win it, great. But I think the reality is that everyone needs the public to make that decision now.
And listen, I asked this question fully aware that our democracy has its issues and problems and fragilities right now. But do you think that this has been such a crazy time in the UK that not only will there be a demand for new leadership and perhaps a general election, but a change in how you all operate your democracy to prevent some of this turmoil going forward? Not just changing people, but changing the structure of your government, because this seems like a lot.
A lot is an understatement, I think. I've someone phoned me the other day who's an old colleague in London who was a former director of comms of Boris, and goes, I don't remember politics ever being like this, you know. And I think the reality is that our democracy, I would argue, is a bit more representative than the US. You know, the fact that your vote doesn't go to the president, it goes to the state, and you have to win the state to get points so they actually are elected in the Electoral College. You know, people do elect their local parliamentarian, and that person, again, you're going for them because you're electing you want the biggest party in office. I think there will be some more formality around a few things. One, are we going to stick to the Fixed Term Act, right? Are we saying 5 years? You can change your leader as many times. The turmoil here is like the 5-year act doesn't exist anymore. They broke it twice. And what they've now, you know, we don't know when they're going to call an election. That's gone back to a time where, you know, a handshake used to mean something, you know, where they used to say, well, we'll definitely call an election in 4 years. And Tony Blair consistently had an election every 4 years. Even though he never needed to do that, there was like an honor agreement almost that he had that election every 4 years. Now we're trusting people too much. And people here, you can see the Conservative Party want to retain power for as long as possible and have no desire to actually put this back to the public as the fear of loss of their own job. They're not being public servants, which we're elected to. So there will be change to democracy. I do feel a lot of people will push towards something called proportional representation, which is another voting structure. But I don't know if it will change the amount of years they'll be allowed to serve.
Wow.
Sure. All right, Ashish Prashar, Boris Johnson's former press secretary, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your analysis on this topic.
Yes.
All right, now let's bring in London correspondent Laura Macon-Isherwood for more details on the developing story. Laura, how are people reacting right now? I know it's only been about a half an hour, but just tell us more about what the reaction has been to this resignation.
I mean, everybody was waiting for something big to happen, but perhaps we didn't expect it to happen quite so suddenly. When we saw the chair of the 1922 committee heading into Downing Street, the 1922 committee, of course, that quite influential group of MPs that can decide when a new leadership election should be run within the Conservative Party. We saw him heading into Downing Street for that meeting. We knew then that something might be afoot. And then suddenly this announcement that we would get a statement statement from Liz Truss on the steps of Downing Street had everybody then in that sort of urgent mode of wondering what is going on. So this decision by her to resign after just 44 days in office is quite amazing, but it comes after weeks of turbulence, of course, and in the last 24 hours, Liz Truss losing her Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and then also facing those claims that the Conservative Party was manhandling people in the voting lobby in Parliament last night, something that the Conservative Party is denying. So it's been a tricky time. As for the public reaction, this has been all people have been talking about for the last week at least, when Liz Truss is going to go. On the streets yesterday, we spoke to people and they said it had to be something quite sharp, quite sudden, quite soon. But now I think people are wondering what is going to come next. We have a leader that has stood down, said that they're going to remain in post while another leader of the Conservative Party is elected by their members and their MPs. We're waiting for the decisions on that as to how exactly that's going to take place. And it's another leader that's in Downing Street that's taken place without a general election. This is chosen by the Conservative Party, not the public. And we've seen from the polls of late that actually people are more in favour of having Labour in government. And that's what Labour is now calling for, an immediate general election so that the public can have their say. But at the moment, it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
So if that does not happen, then who is next in line within the Conservative Party? Are the alternatives any better than what we've seen?
Well, of course, we've seen most recently the new Chancellor put into government. That's the Finance Minister here in the UK, Jeremy Hunt. Plenty of people were saying that he might be potentially the one that was pulling the strings behind the scenes in Downing Street. We've had reports that he's saying that he's not going to run to be the next leader. He's tried a couple of times before, never made it to the top job. And so it seems like he's happy to just stick in that position for now. Who else might there be? Well, we've got Rishi Sunak, of course. He's the other former finance minister. He came second in this contest against Liz Truss to become the leader most recently. Questions about whether he might run. Plenty of people saying he has to make up his mind pretty quickly if he's going to go for it, or if he isn't. We also know that Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, he's been favourable among the public. He's been very firm and strong and steady, I suppose you could say, in the UK's response to the war in Ukraine. He previously did not run for that position. Maybe he'll change his mind now, who knows? But we know that he has links with the military. He may just want to stick with defence and see that through, given the current climate with Russia. So there's a lot of people that are sort of speculatively being bandied around. Will it be better? It will be certainly a different approach to the one that Liz Truss has promised. And we know that from Rishi Sunak in particular, he was pledging to up taxes, try to maintain a very stable economy. And it could well be that that is now what the public want, what the party want, given the sheer chaos that has ensued following Liz Truss's election.
And obviously everyone will be looking forward and playing the speculation games you just said about who comes next. But just to kind of put a bow on the very short Liz Truss era, I'm just wondering, the basic narrative is that she had this economic plan that she unveiled. Everyone hated it. It tanked the economy there in the UK. She had to fire this one and that one, and it was just a disaster. I just am wondering, in the world of politics, before you present a plan to the public, at least here in America, again, I say this sitting in the U.S., it goes through focus groups, it goes through consultants, they take polling on it, it's how it's marketed, what you call it. How do you, brand new to office, release something that everyone hated and that was a disaster upon arrival? Doesn't that speak volumes about either the people around her or her political instincts that she crumbled this quickly and put out such a god-awful plan?
Well, yeah, and you're right. There will have been a lot of advisors around her, probably suggesting the options that she could take. But ultimately, it was for Liz Truss and her then-Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, of course, remember him, he went just a few weeks back, to put out this plan to the public. Now, we have to remember as well that this wasn't a manifesto presented to the public in a general election. It was simply put forward to members of the Conservative Party. And so it appears that this plan for a low-tax economy was what Liz Truss knew would win her votes within Conservative Party members. Now, they were the ones that voted for her. And we know that that was favourable among that group. But clearly it hasn't worked with the economy, given the current situation that we're facing globally, economically, and of course within the UK more domestically as well. And so it appears that she probably had to put this forward because that is what she was voted in as leader for, to keep Conservative Party members happy, rather than actually what might have been in the best interest of the economy and the public. And so that, as you were saying, with those advisors around her, it may well have been that some people were saying, do you know what, there are other options here, or there should be other options. There must have been people who were modelling what the outcome of this plan must have been, but clearly Liz Truss thought that that was the best way forward. Now her plans have been undone. We've seen those series of U-turns made by the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. He's backtracked on most of them, really. And we saw the pound lift slightly in value against the dollar after that. So clearly, there are other people with potentially differing and maybe better ideas when it comes to the economy that are in place now. And let's see how that happens. But as I say, we're now waiting to find out who the next leader of the Conservative Party will be. We're told that an election will take place within a week. But we then need to find out then if the public are happy with that. If another leader, yet another person in number 10 who's been selected by the Conservative Party is what the public want.
That was a fantastic explanation. Yeah. Thank you for that, because I think, if I'm hearing you right, it was just an extreme disconnect between what would make the Conservative Party happy and then what the country itself and the economy and the public wanted and could handle.
That's what it seems.
That was a great explanation, Laura. Thank you so much for that. Huge help. London correspondent Laura Macon Isherwood, busy on your beat. You will be for at least the next 7 days and beyond. Thank you so much for hopping in front of a camera for us. We appreciate it.
All right, let's get to Nicoletta Gulace, Associate Professor of British History from the University of New Hampshire. Welcome back. Good to see you again. I wasn't expecting to see you this soon after we saw you yesterday, but your initial reaction to this resignation just 44 days in.
Well, I think I actually don't think this was a big surprise. We watched her being mercilessly grilled and booed yesterday in Parliament. I think part of the reason that she was treated with such incredible incivility was that they were trying to get her out. It's like trying to get your dog to drop the tennis ball. You know, you just stop. And so I think that's exactly what happened. They must have an idea lined up of who they're going to bring in afterwards.
And do you have any thoughts about how this is going to be handled in the next week? We've heard from different people saying that the people are going to take to the streets because they're going to demand a general election. Then, of course, the party is going to be trying to get their own person in place within the next week. And we've heard Boris Johnson's name be mentioned. What are your kind of thoughts on how everything will be wrapped up?
Well, I think there's going to be a scrum because right now the Labour Party would like nothing better than a general election, which they're likely to sweep as completely as Boris Johnson swept the last election. But I think the Conservatives must have a plan for avoiding this because if there is a general election, they'll be out of office. So I think they're going to quickly try and organize a vote among the select group of Conservative Party constituents that will choose the next leader. Now, there is one other possibility, and that would be if they had only one candidate to challenge, a fight for this position, in which case it would be called, they call it a coronation, sort of, they have very ironic sense of humor. And in that case, that person would step in. If that happens, I think it's probably likely to be Jeremy Hunt because he did steady the economy and everybody thinks right now he's de facto running the government.
Wow. It is kind of head spinning. Again, not a surprise that she has now stepped down, but certainly a surprise that things got so bad so quickly. I'm just wondering, the Conservative Party there in Parliament, they've seen this disaster. They had the scandals of the Boris Johnson term. They had the 10-minute tenure of Liz Truss. They know the public sentiment is not on their side if this thing is really in the hands of the people. Is there any kind of introspection that going on in that party? Anything they can do to salvage what seems like a pretty disastrous situation? And do you think public sentiment, in light of how rocky things have been, will have any real impact on how this all shakes out? It does seem like a moment where it just can't be business as usual?
I think the real problem for the Conservative Party is that they've run out of ideas. And in the past, I think Liz Truss was trying to evoke Margaret Thatcher. Those were top-down, kind of Reaganomic, libertarian ideas about releasing the economy, lowering taxes to create growth. And that was sort of the only idea that hadn't been tried recently, and it just completely upended the market. So, I have some very grave doubts that the Conservatives are really going to be able to deliver something that's both acceptable to the public and can save the economy right now. For instance, Jeremy Hunt is backing away on a promise to give cost of living increases to old age pensioners. He is backing away from Liz Truss and Boris Johnson's promise to cap energy bills, which are just skyrocketing because of the war in Ukraine. These are things that the voters want, but having those things makes it impossible to balance the budget. So I think they're between a rock and a hard place.
That's a good way to put it. Rock in a hard place.
Absolutely. Nicoletta, thank you for an interview that lasted longer than the administration of Liz Truss. We appreciate your insight into the UK. What a politically riveting time. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yep, and we'll continue to